Okay, you're not just a contractor, you're an entrepreneur. Okay. And if you don't run your company like one, this is going to be a business that punishes you, because being able to build in our business is not enough. You can perform beautiful work and you could have a full backlog and you could have good people and you can still lose money and you could still run out of cash and start growing a company that you're not prepared to grow. Because the moment you start to market, negotiate, and sign contracts, schedule work, hire people, manage production, bill, collect on bills, accept risk, you're no longer just practicing construction, you're operating a business. We're construction entrepreneurs. And contracting is one of the most complicated businesses that a person can operate. Okay, so let me show you where contractor owners get trapped. Okay, so the trap usually happens in stages. First, you know how to build. That gives you technical confidence. Then you start taking on jobs. Now you have some commercial exposure. Then you start hiring people. Now you have leadership obligations. Then eventually you own a company. But mentally, you still may be the person that's doing the work. The title changed long before your mindset changed. So you keep solving problems with personal effort. It's what I call personal heroics. And personal heroics cannot be scaled in any way. And personal heroics is not entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is the engineering and marshaling of people and resources to create systems that duplicate outcomes. Your personal heroics have nothing to do with that. So then you end up pricing from experience, you recruit when you're desperate, you negotiate because you're afraid to lose the job, because you haven't built the sales bone yet. How could you? You spent 20 years in the field. You schedule based on what everybody hopes will happen, and then you call that entrepreneurship, because the company's still moving, because you're getting some work and you're getting some revenue. But movement is not control, and activity is not a system, and personal heroics cannot scale. So the owner has to stop thinking only about the work and start thinking about the entire commercial machine. So a contracting company is an interconnected commercial operating system. Marketing creates opportunities, and estimating decides which risk is worth buying, because we're basically buying contracts, aren't we? I mean, especially if you're in a low bid environment. You have to have a go, no go system, bid, no bid. You got to decide which risk is worth it, and is the juice worth the squeeze? Contracts then allocates that risk. And we can get into contracts, because contracts outlines the promises that we owe each other, the obligations we have to deliver to each other, and outlines the mechanisms and the machinations if we don't deliver on those promises. Now, negotiation then determines whether you preserve your leverage. As an entrepreneur and a steward of your business, you've got to learn how to negotiate, protect yourself, and create leverage where you can, and preserve that leverage in writing in the contract. The root word of contractor is contract, not hammer and nail. CPM scheduling, which is often by unsophisticated contractors and guys that have never got their hair on fire and their fucking head cut off, don't understand the power of a CPM schedule, and when it's done accurately, the data and the protection that it gives you. When you look at it as a tool, it's just something that you have to do. It's you don't understand what it is. That's why you say that. And that's why you feel that way. The way I can rate a contractor is I talk to him about CPM scheduling, or I talk to his project managers about CPM scheduling, and I'll know in an instant what kind of gameplay and level of gameplay they have. If they could speak CPM science talk, they understand its benefit, they run it like a Swiss watch, they're clean as driven white snow on it. If you don't, then a few things. You don't fully understand it, or you've showed me where you are on the totem pole of the organization. The CPM schedule turns promises into time, and it protects you massively, and it's a moneymaker. Project controls, your project management methodology and systems, they document reality. Then accounting and WIP will tell you whether the work is becoming profitable and if you're collecting cash, and if you're hitting your forecast, if you are forecasting. If you guys are hitting your benchmarks, hitting your production units, not 2 guys, 2 days, but my production unit outcomes. Recruiting determines whether the company is going to have the capacity to do it again and again and again. Being able to attract the best talent. And I'll tell you something, in our business, the best talent can't work for somebody they never heard of. These are not side departments. These are all administrative chores. These are the machinery of the company. And when an owner says, I'm a contractor, I'm not a marketer, the market doesn't care. When he says, I'm not an accountant, cash doesn't care. I don't need to know about marketing. I don't need to know about accounting. I'm not a CPA. I don't need to know about legal and contracts. I'm not a lawyer. All of those things don't care about that statement. When he says, I don't understand contracts, well, the owner on the other side of that contract is very delighted, to say the least. You don't get to ignore a business function because it's not the function that you brought into the business. So every function hands either risk or control to the next function. Marketing brings in the opportunity. Estimating price is the risk. Negotiation and contracts, they decide what risk level we're willing to accept and how we're going to protect ourselves. Scheduling decides whether the promise that we're making in that contract can actually physically happen and holds us to it. Production and project control determine whether you can prove what happened. Billing and collection determine whether the company actually receives the money, and a mistake does not stay inside its department. A bad opportunity becomes a bad estimate. A bad estimate becomes a desperate negotiation, and a bad contract becomes an impossible schedule. An impossible schedule is going to become lost productivity. Lost productivity becomes a very, very ugly whip, and an ugly whip is going to be a cash crisis. Okay, so that's why I refuse to teach these subjects as disconnected tips, which everybody else does, because they don't know how to connect it. They never played in that game. They view these things as chores, something they heard about. They are not intimately familiar with any of these concepts and don't understand how they connect to each other. They're one system, and weakness moves downstream until it becomes margin loss. And it's too late. When it becomes margin loss, cash loss, or lost capacity, it's already over for you. Checkmate. Your game has got to get elevated, and it can't get elevated if you keep an identity of a construction worker rather than an entrepreneur in the construction space. So let's take a look at this. The contractor has to answer 8 questions. And confidence is not an answer. Can we create the right opportunities? Did we price the real risk? Did we accept contract terms that we actually can survive? Did we preserve leverage in our negotiation? Can the work actually flow through a credible CPM schedule? Can we document and control what happens in the field? Are margin, cash, and WIP, are they telling us the truth? Do we have an accurate picture of things? And can our people carry the next level of work? If one answer is no, you have to ask yourself these questions. You've got to get out and take a beat. Get out of the weeds for a second. Take a beat, man. Open up your tablet. Take a note. Get organized. If one answer to these questions is no, then the company has a constraint. It's easy. Just identify, get clinical with it. None of these no's are personal indictments against you. You've got to look at the business clinically and don't get depressed about it. Get it as a data point and then fix it, because that constraint will eventually show up as less revenue, less margin, less cash, and less capacity. And the entrepreneur's job is to identify that constraint before the project forces the lesson at a full price, at the most expensive price. So it's not a personal indictment against you. It's your duty as an entrepreneur to identify these things early, just like in project management and IOR. It's the project manager's duty to identify risk as soon as he possibly can and allocate dollars to it, because if it explodes, I want to know what its impact is so I can be tracking my indicated gross profit if it goes sideways on us, which will help me help that person, my PM, him or her, apply the appropriate treatment to eliminate, recover, or offset it. These aren't personal indictments against us. These are duties that we owe the company. And when you don't adopt the entrepreneur identity and philosophy and understanding, you're never going to be able to do it. I'm throwing you a life raft here. Today's your day to make that change. It's crucially important. So then a contractor asks, how do we get this project done? That's a necessary question, but it's not a sufficient question. And in contracting, there's a lot of those things. It's not that that's a bad question and that question isn't relevant, but it's not the full picture. And contracting is full of that in every bucket. I feel like a broken record in contractor school and in contractor circles saying, hey, this is what we typically ask. This is how we typically talk. This is what the industry says and does. And then I say, those are not bad. And everyone goes, yeah, I say them. This is how we do them. And I say, okay, you're right, but it's not the full picture. And it's in those nuances that your success lives. Because the entrepreneur asks, how do we build a company that gets projects done repeatedly? How do we build a company that gets projects done profitably and without losing control over that project? That's the difference between completing work, focusing on completing work, and creating enterprise value. You've got to do both of them. That's why I said that question isn't wrong. It's just not the full picture. Many of you guys aren't inherently doing anything wrong. You're just not doing some of the other stuff. Like I talked about in my other video about the daily whip. You guys are 95% of the way doing it if you're doing daily reports. You're just not doing the other thing that's crucially important. So the project is the output and the company is the machine. So if every successful outcome in the company depends on you personally intervening, what I call personal heroics, you hear that? That's me. I've coined that. The machine doesn't work. I mean, it's an admission prima facie that there isn't a machine. You're the machine. Right? So if your best project manager carries the company in his head, the machine doesn't work, guys. Your financial report explains the damage 3 months after it happened. The machine's not working. Company's not scalable because the owner is willing to work harder. It's scalable when the operating system can consistently produce the result. Like I said, entrepreneurship is engineering. It's systems creation. Systems are what create desired ends, not personal heroics. Systems. And it's the constant fine-tuning and course-correcting of those systems that makes us valuable. If we created a system once and it works that way forever, you're lucky. It also means that your company never changed. It never grew. Your people never got better. They never expanded their abilities. You never got new people in, right? Because your systems have to uniquely and directly be tied into the team that you're fielding. What good's a system if your people can't perform it? Right? So systems require constant fine-tuning, management, oversight. They have to. And then that's the value you bring. If you can't do those things and you're not doing it, or you're under some stupid advice from some Instagram idiot that you set this thing once and you forget it, that ain't our business, man. You are going to get hurt. And then if that's the case, then let me ask you this question. I'll give you this thought experiment. What value do you bring to the company then? Do you really expect and think people are going to show up to work every day and make you rich if you bring no value? If you're not constantly optimizing this thing, changing it, slotting new positions and people around based on their personal growth and the new people that are coming in and the scaling and compounding of that company. You don't bring any value to it. You said it once and you forget it. You think guys are going to show up and make you rich. If you don't have a value to the company, then you're valueless there, aren't you? There's no use. You're useless. It's such a stupid notion. But there are a lot of things out there that are prevalent and are stupid. Now you know. So let's take a look at this. There are 3 levels of work. At the first level, you do the work. You personally create the output. At the second level, you run the work. You coordinate the projects. You coordinate the people. That's the second level of the work. And at the third level, you build the system. You create repeatable capacity, control, and profit. That's where you live as an entrepreneur. You live right there in step 3. At least that's where you're supposed to be living. That's what the business is requiring you to do. But sometimes you guys are flopping in between levels 1 and 2. And that's because your identity is stuck you there. Most contractors remain trapped in the first 2 levels. They're either producing or firefighting. They never create enough distance to design the capacity. The distance isn't created to design the capacity. Your real job as the owner is to build the system that makes good performance normal, not heroic. This is not anything new. I didn't invent this. The problem is that entrepreneurship is seen as salesmanship in this world because of media influencing. It's not. It's systems creation. It's leadership. It's engineering. You end up running this business and doing all of these things in levels 1 and 2. You can't. Your job as an owner is to build the system that makes great performance normal, that makes great performance duplicatable, not dependent on a person's mood, not dependent on one person in the organization that's irreplaceable. That's not your job. That is not the way you want to be operating your business. This becomes a failure pattern. There's a very true failure pattern that exists throughout all businesses. Fragile contracting companies have very recognizable patterns. I see them every day, man. I consult with hundreds of contractors. I probably might be consulting with you right now, or you might be in one of my groups. I see these patterns. They're very recognizable. I've also seen them growing up, being involved in this business and being exposed to it. I know these patterns very well. They have no demand system. So the owner takes the wrong work. Very recognizable pattern. They estimate by instinct. So risk remains invisible. When I talk about estimating based on units, you would be surprised how many guys' eyes glaze over. They never heard this concept before. Recognizable pattern. They sign terms that they can't administer. They don't even know what they're signing. They didn't go and take a free little course on contracts or join Contractor Circle and become a master at it. They schedule the jobs based on hope because they don't know how to use Microsoft Project. Their PM doesn't know how to use Microsoft Project, and they can't even come close to Primavera. So they don't even know what the hell we're talking about. Predecessor, successor, start with a lag, finish, start, hammocking activity. They don't even know what the hell we're talking about. They discover whip problems after the month is over, man. I am huge on this. I pound this like a broken record. My guys will tell you, they just hear me talking about this all the time. So important. And I get it tremendous, even though it's so self-evidently amazing to do. And the benefit of it, I get a tremendous amount of pushback on it. And I just don't understand where that comes from. It's pattern. They recruit only when somebody quits. Okay? Or a new project's already on fire. And they have issues with recruiting because they don't have any marketing in place. Because you're not going to recruit good talent if nobody knows who you are. Well, I'm not a marketer. I'm a contractor. Dumbest thing I ever heard. You're an entrepreneur. You better learn how to get great at all of that. Marketing, sales, negotiation. You need to learn accounting. You need to learn contract. You need to learn everything about running a company. Doesn't mean you have to do it, but you have to know about it so you can direct the people to do it. The company can look busy, successful, and completely be out of control at the same time. That's the dangerous part, because revenue can hide and backlog can hide behind weakness. Large contract can hide weaknesses for a little bit, and then it will expose it, and then it will be very expensive. Okay, so growth often gives a broken system far more places to fail and be expensive. So don't measure the strength of the company by how busy everybody looks. Measure it by the output of the systems in place. I want you guys to score the company from 1 to 5. Yes, it's going to require you to actually do this. This will be a beneficial exercise for you. Don't just consume without doing. Don't just keep it in your head. That's the whole problem. Take a minute and do this. Score the company 1 to 5 across marketing, estimating, contracts, negotiations, scheduling, project control, accounting, WIP, and recruiting. And 1 means the function depends on personality, memory, or personal heroics. 3 means that the process exists, but execution and measurement are inconsistent on it. 5 means that the function's repeatable, measured, owned, documented, and it's being improved upon. Okay? Do not score how smart you are. Do not score how long you've been in business. Do not score how hard everybody's working. Score your actual system. Then choose the lowest number, and that is probably the next constraint you should be attacking. At least this is a good starting point. Not the most exciting problem, not the newest software thing or whatever you guys are trying to do, the weakest link in the commercial chain. I see this all the time. Resources held up in some new type of thing because everybody's excited about it, but the whole thing is burning down over here. Why didn't you take your time and fix that before you went and paid these people and got on board with this thing? Because there isn't an accurate accounting that's being taken place and being done in the business from a systematic approach. Now, I built a contractor entrepreneur operating audit. Okay, it's going to walk you through all 8 disciplines, and it's going to give you a 30-day operating move. You can download it here. It's going to be attached to this video. So you'll see the link, or you will see a button there. You can, depending on where you're watching this, you could download it. I want you to print it, score the company honestly, assign an owner to the weakest function, then define the weekly proof that the system is getting better. All of you guys have the ability and capability to do this, and I want you to remember that whatever your findings are, or whatever light bulbs went off when you listen to this, none of it is a personal indictment against you and who you are and your future abilities. It's just a clinical assessment of where the organization is today and needs your focus and attention. That's it. And that's how you have to look at it, because that's the truth. Because you don't have a time machine, you can't go back in time, but you do have today. And today you can make that change to have a better tomorrow and start benefiting from these things immediately. You're not a construction worker. You're not a contractor. You're an entrepreneur that sells construction services. And you need to take on that identity before it's too late. See you on the next one.